Do you want to take your SMG accuracy from this at 20% to this at 43.75%? Then definitely stick around for the rest of this video. So similar to the video we made earlier on today about what are the best attachments for the assault rifles, now this video is going to go over what are the best attachments for every SMG in the game at the moment. We've pretty much spent all day testing in private lobbies, and that's all we've been doing to find out what are the best attachments. So first we're going to start off with the VEL-46 or the MP7 as most people probably know it as. Now, I don't really know why they changed the name of this, probably they don't have rights or whatever, but regardless of that, we're going to mainly discuss this gun first and a bit more in depth, because as we gradually get through it, a lot of the attachments will be relatively similar, because we are trying to focus, like I said, for similar things like movement speed and getting a bit of control in the weapon as well. So if you do enjoy this style of content, don't forget to subscribe to the channel to try to reach our goal of 50k, but let's get into the muzzle attachment first of all. So the main one I want to point out here is the AVR compensator. Now, I do want to quickly point out a quick tip when you're looking through attachments, and that's because I spent way too much time looking through all of this, is that if something says vertical recoil control as a pro and then horizontal recoil control afterwards, it means it helps with vertical more than horizontal, and then if it switches the other way, so it says horizontal then vertical, it means it helps with horizontal more than vertical. But it's just something you want to keep in mind, because the main thing we're really focusing on controlling here with any gun is mainly the horizontal recoil, because there's no way of compensating for that in game. You want to use the AVR compensator, which we will be using on pretty much every SMG. Now, when it comes to underbarrel, I do think the Ripper underbarrel, if you have it available, is pretty much the best option at the moment. I've not really tested one that works better than this, to be honest. So I'm going to stick with the Ripper, because I do think it's one of the better options here. It does con your ADS, but it's not really that bad on an SMG, to be perfectly honest with you. So definitely the Ripper underbarrel. The next attachment is the laser attachment here, and the main one you want is the one that actually helps with hipfire accuracy over the hipfire recoil control. And the reason for that is because accuracy you can't really get in game, and you want to make sure there's not a lot of spread, but the control of the recoil itself, how fast the rate kind of moves upwards, you can kind of compensate for in game. Kind of hard to do, don't get me wrong, but you can control it manually, whereas the other one you can't control at all. So you might as well go for that, which is the ULO-66 laser. Now, this doesn't have any cons. Some of the other lasers do help a bit more with control, but they are visible, so obviously that is a bit of a trade-off. I do think the trade-off's sometimes worth it, to be honest, depending on if you hit fire a lot. So just keep that in mind. Then when it comes to the barrel option, I do like the LM Series 7 on the MP7 essentially. It does control recoil really well actually on this gun, especially to use it in those longer ranges if you really want to, but it doesn't really con the movement too much either, so it's always a benefit of having that. Then when it comes to the last attachment, you can choose whatever you want. The iron sights are relatively decent if you're using it at close range. If you're going to use this at anything kind of longer range, then you could stick the Slimline Pro, which is my favorite optic for SMGs. But again, like I said, the optic one you can mix and match really, that's personal preference, but I like the Slimline. I like this build. I think it's a super perfect build for the MP7. Now when it comes to actually testing the MP7, we'll test it for kind of relative recoil here. As you can see, is an absolute laser beam. Having 40 rounds as well is very ideal. As we all know, for Modern Warfare 2019, this gun had a base 30 rounds, so we're definitely getting a buff here in general, so that's ideal. When it comes to hip fire, as you can see, at that distance, which is quite far, to be honest, that's about 10 meters, very accurate hip firing as well, like I said, with those attachments that we have on the weapon. So like I said, you can actually use this gun at relatively long ranges as well if you really needed to, and that's thanks to the barrel and the underbarrel attachments combined. Next up we have the MX9, or the AUG if you want to call it that, and I do think it's a solid SMG in this game. Obviously when it comes to attachments, we've got that AVR compensator once again. It's got the same benefits as before. We're choosing the ULO-66 laser once again. It's got the same benefits as before. Obviously, like I said, the attachments will remain relatively the same for the most part. When it comes to a barrel this time, you want to choose the STB factory barrel. It's going to help with recoil control and bullet velocity, but it's going to con movement just a little. It's not a huge con to movement speeds from what I can feel in game. We will need to test actual movement speeds with the data and the numbers, but I do think it's a relatively decent barrel overall. Then when it comes to the magazine, you want to choose the 32 round mags. The mags that you get base with this weapon are not great. so you will be burning through them relatively quickly. So just make sure you choose the 32 round mags. And then when it comes to the optic here, I do think you need one. Again, I like the slimline, but you can choose whatever you want. But I don't really like the iron sights on the AUG, unfortunately. If you can get past that, then obviously you can choose something else if you really want to. Something I would recommend actually is the recoil controlling stock, which is the Brune stock. Now you can combine that and it'll make the gun an absolute laser. Just keep in mind that it will con your movement quite a bit. So when it comes to the firing range and testing this gun, as you can see, in that kind of medium range, it's super accurate. And even at long range, you can see there, we'll do it again. It's a really accurate weapon, and that's why this, along with the MP7, is super, super solid. Testing the hip fire again at 10 meters, completely viable. So definitely make sure you're taking advantage of that hip fire accuracy, because it is actually really good. And obviously, to be fair, you'll probably be a bit closer, maybe like 5 meters away from your opponent, so it'll be even more accurate as well. Next up, we've got the LACHMANN sub, or the MP5, and with this one, we actually have a few different changes that we need to do, and that is because the gun is a bit more of that kind of aggressive, high rate of fire weapon, and again, we'll cover that just now. So when it comes to the laser, you want to make sure you are using the ULO, as always. When it comes to the muzzle this time, you actually want to choose the Brune Pendulum muzzle. This is going to help more with vertical control, and that's because this gun has a bit more vertical recoil than the rest of the guns that are in the submachine gun category. So I do think the Brune one will be the better choice, and overall just feels a lot better as well. Now when it comes to underbarrels, you want to choose the Phase 3 grip. We don't have the Ripper, unfortunately, so we will be going for this one. Has very similar pros, it just doesn't feel quite as good, but we'll use it for the meantime because that's all we have access to. Then when it comes to the stock, I do think you should actually use the recoil factory stock. I do think is a definite solid choice. You can actually swap that attachment out for something else if you really wanted to. When it comes to magazine, 40 round mags are more than enough in my opinion. You could choose the 50 round drums, but I don't think you really need to slow down your movement that much, to be perfectly honest. And that is my favorite build for the MP5. Like I said, the main attachment you could play around with in this case is actually the factory stock here. So you can change and put an optic on if you like. So testing this out in the firing range, as you can see here now, hitting shots at about 20 meters. And you can even hit your shots out at range as well if you really had to. I mean, obviously recoil isn't everything when it comes to SMGs, but that is definitely ideal to be able to hit those shots at that distance. And then the hip fire accuracy, not quite as good as the MP7 in my opinion, but definitely still usable. Obviously, like I said, most of your ranges will actually be at 5 meters and not 10 meters, but the hip fire accuracy is not quite as good as the MP7, as you can see. Next up, we have the VAZNEV-9K, and this has probably got to be the worst gun I've actually played around with today. At this point, I've pretty much played around with all the ARs, all the SMGs, and all the LMGs, and this gun feels the absolute worst out of all of them, to be perfectly honest. I don't really think there is any attachments that can make this gun feel any better, and if there's one gun you don't really need to unlock, in my opinion, it's this one. Because it's just not great at all. When it comes to the build though, a build that I've kind of settled on, and to be perfectly honest, it doesn't feel amazing, and that's just because the gun itself is just really bad, is the AVR compensator as always. We chose the 1 milliwatt laser box, and that's because that's the one that helps with hip fire accuracy. Then when it comes to barrel, we did actually take the recoil controlling barrel, which is the Response 3. We also took the Elite stock as well, and that's just to make sure we can get best recoil control from this gun. Like I said, I do really feel sorry for anyone who did look forward to having this gun in the game, but it's really not that good. In terms of like time to kill and stuff, as you can see, it's not great out to about 20 meters. And the only reason the recoil control is so good on this is because we were attaching a lot of recoil control attachments on here. If you take away one of these attachments, this gun does not feel great at all. And then when it comes to hip fire accuracy, as you can see here, is not great either. And it's not even as good as the MP5 in my opinion. So definitely not a good gun. If you can avoid maybe unlocking this or using this at all, in my opinion, until he gets a kind of sort of buff, then maybe do that. Next up is my favorite SMG, and this was even from the beta, but unfortunately I do think they've actually nerfed this gun. Even from the beta, it doesn't feel quite as good as it did before, but it's still a relatively decent SMG to use, and I still enjoy using it. So we are still using that AVR compensator, we're still using the Ripper underbarrel, we're still using that 1 milliwatt laser box. which is helping with the hip fire accuracy. Then when it comes to the last couple of attachments for this gun, the ones I've settled on are actually the X10 grip, which is going to help with sprint to fire speed and aim down sight speed. It does con your recoil a little, but this SMG doesn't have like a ton of recoil anyway. And then when it comes to the optic, like I said, I do like the slimline as my favorite optic to use at the minute. Now, testing this gun out in the firing range once again, as you can see, definitely very accurate. In terms of TTK at long range, obviously it's going to take a very long time to kill someone, but that's because it's an SMG at the end of the day. Close range is definitely decent. It's not the fastest killing SMG though, but it is accurate for sure. When it comes to hip fire accuracy, definitely very accurate as well, definitely up there and comparable with the MP7. So definitely a solid choice overall when it comes to an SMG in my opinion. Next up, we've got the MINIBAK, or the BIZON for that matter, and in this case again we've got the AVR compensator, the 1mW laser box. I would recommend putting an optic on this gun. The irons are not very good at all, very hard to see through. When it comes to the stock, I think the elite stock's definitely going to help with the recoil control a bit. And then also I would put a rear grip on here again to control the recoil. This gun isn't as good as it was in previous Call of Duty games in my opinion. So taking this gun also into the gun range as well now, as you can see, at about 10 to 20 meters, relatively accurate, and even at long range, very accurate as well. So you can definitely use this gun. Super solid choice. And also we'll test this hip fire out as well quite quickly once this dummy comes back up. Hip fire, probably not as accurate as some of the other weapons we've seen, to be perfectly honest. But overall, it's not a bad choice for a gun, let's be perfectly honest. Next up, we have the PDSW, which is also the P90. And this is actually a really good SMG, especially for multiplayer anyway. Very accurate gun, in my opinion. Super easy to use as well. And again, we are using that AVR compensator. We are using the TAC laser in this case, but it only helps a hip fire recoil control first, and not accuracy first. Unfortunately, we don't really have anything that has that choice with this gun, which is a bit unfortunate, but that is the one we're going to go for. When it comes to barrels and underbarrels, now, first of all, the underbarrels are blocked off originally, but if you do select a barrel, which I highly recommend, the FTAC Defense, I think this is the best barrel for this, and you have to use it because it makes this gun an absolute laser. And then not only that, you can then put on the Ripper underbarrel to make it even better. So, I mean, it just makes perfect sense. And that is a super solid build. Now, I don't really like the iron sights on this gun. Now, if you can get away with it, then by all means you could put another attachment on. I like this build. I think this is the perfect build for this gun. I have played around with this gun quite a bit actually because I do enjoy it. So testing the PDSW out again, close range, absolutely melts in my opinion. And long range, don't get me wrong, is not like super easy to use, but it's not impossible to use either. As long as you're pulling down on your analog stick, you can still land a couple of shots at range, which is relatively decent. And then when it comes to hip fire accuracy, it's actually one of the best as well. As you can see here, you're still landing your shots at about 20 meters, which you probably really shouldn't be doing in the first place, but you can do it if you need to. This gun feels so good in this game right now. I actually really enjoy using this along with the MP7 and the Hurricane. Those are my three favorite SMGs. Last but not least, we have the FENNEC, and the FENNEC was in Modern Warfare 2019, and is very similar to the way it was in that game as well, in the way that even though we have all of our attachments that we're used to putting on these guns, we also need to put on that large mag as well because it burns through ammo ridiculously fast. Now, the iron sights are okay on this gun. They're not great. So I personally would recommend this build right here. So slimline with the FENNEC-45 mag. And then obviously we've got the phase 3 grip because we don't have the Ripper available, unfortunately. And then we are using the ULO laser and then the AVR compensator. But if you don't mind the iron sights, or if you don't mind not having a laser on there, then I would definitely 100% recommend the X-Command stock. I think this is a really good stock at controlling recoil for this gun, and this gun does have a bit of recoil because it does have a super fast fire rate. So it's going to be personal preference here when it comes to what attachments you want to use with this gun, but it just depends on if you like hip firing more or if you like having a bit more recoil control. But overall, I do think those couple of builds I mentioned there, making those slight adjustments, definitely solid changes. Now we're in the test range once again, and we are using the X-Command stock along with the laser as well, so we could test out the hip fire accuracy. So we're not using the optic like I recommended. So again, let's test the recoil of this weapon. Absolutely a laser beam at close range, but at long range, as you can see, it struggles a little. We'll try that again at longer ranges, but you could definitely land those shots for sure with this build, as you can see. Now, when it comes to obviously hip firing, we'll show you once again. Not ridiculously accurate, but you can get the job done if the guy is in super close range. So this is why I'd recommend maybe taking off the laser and putting on an optic and mainly focusing on ADS instead of focusing on hip fire with this gun, because it isn't great anyway. So there we have it. Those are the best builds for all of the SMGs in Modern Warfare 2. If you enjoyed this video, don't forget to subscribe, and thank you very much for watching.